You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof blew off and the interior walls got sucked out. And the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Before we get started, quick word from our sponsor, Smitty's Fly Box, delivering monthly flies, fly materials, and accessories each month with their Smitty's subscription fly box. Smitty's has been producing high-quality flies and materials for over 30 years, so now it's time to take the guesswork out of fly time materials and patterns. You can support this podcast right now and get a great selection of flies and fly time materials right now at Smitty's Fly Box. That's Smitty's, S-M-I-T-T-Y-S, Smitty'sFlybox.com. We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you doing, Steve?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah. This has been a little time coming here. I'm glad to finally get you on the podcast and chat about, what you have going in the fly tying space and fly fishing. You've got a few things going. When I first heard about the Round Rocks, I'm really interested to dig into this, because that's a big thing you have going. You also have Smitty's Fly Box, which is a really cool subscription box. And then also a thing I want to talk about is Bobby Knight.
Okay.
Who I've been a big Bobby Knight fan for a long time. He was, of course, a great basketball coach, maybe one of the greatest of all time, and coached the USA. I think he was the coach for the Dream Team, right, back in the day. So we got a lot to talk about today, but let's take it back to like fly fishing. I always love to start there. How did you first get into fly fishing, and kind of what's your first memory there?
Yeah. So I live in northern Utah. And so our family, it's been, a couple generations. My dad grew up on the Logan River here in Cache Valley, and my grandpa lived there. And so, I mean, our family has always fished, and we've always been fishing in the backyard. And then my memories, you mentioned my dad was a basketball coach with Bobby Knight. So when I was a little kid, we lived in Indiana in the Midwest, and my earliest memories of fly fishing was catching bluegill with my dad out there. He didn't have a lot of time as a coach, but we had a few little lakes there in Bloomington, Indiana, that we would go catch bluegill, and then in the summers, we would come back home out west, and some of my earliest memories was, family vacations up to Yellowstone National Park, and we would fish hoppers in August up there on the Yellowstone River, and back then is when the big cutthroats would come up in there out of Yellowstone Lake, and that was really where some of my best memories of learning how to cast, and watching my dad and my grandpa and my uncles, and just family, and just wading out there and trying to chuck a Dave's hopper to those big cutthroats was pretty awesome. So that was really my earliest memories of learning how to cast and hook and fish. But man, we used to catch a ton of bluegill in Indiana with little nymphs and stuff, and that was a lot of fun. So those are my earliest memories of fly fishing.
That's it. And so, and we're going to talk about the basketball here in a little bit as well, because that was my sport, back in the day. That was one of my big sports.
Nice.
I never got quite good enough to play college ball or think of, that sort of thing, but I still love it. But so you're in Indiana, and and then did you kind of have part like Indiana for the basketball season, and then did you move out to Utah at a later point?
We moved out. We were only in Indiana for 6 seasons. So we were there in the 80s, and this was kind of the heyday of Indiana basketball and Bobby Knight. In 84, he was the Olympic coach That was the last amateur team before they had pro. So this was actually before the so-called, the dream team in 92. So this was 84, but that team had like Michael Jordan, Sam Perkins, Ewing, all those guys. It was really the last great amateur team in 84. So we were there for all of that. And then, of course, in 87 is the last national championship that Indiana wins. And that was our last year. My dad was an assistant coach with Coach Knight. And so we moved he got the head coaching job at Utah State in 88 and was able to come home. And that's what brought us home back here to Utah. And that's when I was getting into my teenage years then. So that's kind of how we got back here to Utah.
I see. And so 87, what was that? You were there during, do you remember that? Your dad was the assistant coach for Bobby Knight. Did you?
Oh, man.
So he has a national championship under his belt.
Yes. Uh-huh.
What was that like?
What a thrill to be around Indiana basketball in the 80s as like a 10-year-old kid. When people say, man, I wish I could be a fly on the wall. Well, I was.
Right.
I was a fly on the wall. And
who was that team? Who were the big players? Anybody that went to the NBA?
Yeah. So 87, the big team player was Steve Alford, who is now the coach at Nevada. And he was actually on the 84 Olympic team too. But that's the team that beat Syracuse in the Louisiana Superdome, where Keith Smart hit the last second shot. And I was there. There's like 70,000 people, and to be at that Final Four was pretty magical, really. And so, yeah, just really lucky. I was just a spoiled kid. I was a gym rat. I was in practices and on team buses and planes, and Coach Knight was always really good to me, treated me like his own son because we would fish together all summer, and Coach Knight has two passions. It's basketball and fishing. He's just as passionate about fly fishing as he is basketball. And so when the season was over, and he and my dad would come out west and literally fish for months. And I was able to tag along on a lot of those trips at that time, and more so later in my life when I got a little bit bigger. But that was really the relationship. But yeah, that 87 team, that was really a great team. And they still show some of those highlights, when you watch March Madness of that shot.
Oh, they do.
Yeah. But that was the great thing about Indiana and Coach Knight. He didn't have, big talent a lot of times. Usually, he had a lot of lesser talented kids because a lot of kids couldn't play for him because he was so demanding.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he always seemed to do better, do a lot more success with less talent. That was his genius, really. So
that's right. That was his thing. He was a very hard-nosed coach, right? You didn't mess. I think he even had some things along the way where he maybe got into a little trouble just because he was such a hard-nosed, But that's the thing is, some of the greatest coaches were that's what it took to be a champion, right? That's kind of the thing.
And that's the old school way, you don't see that anymore, really. So, but yeah, it was really a great childhood back there, and coming home to Utah was great, and we still keep in touch with Coach Knight even to this day. So he's a pretty strong family friend for sure.
Well, and we'll leave some of that maybe if I have some more questions a little bit later. But how did you go from, so you get into fishing, you have a little 6 years of Indiana, but you've got this Utah connection. When does, you've got this big round flies, right? Talk
Round
about
Rocks?
Round Rocks. Talk about how that began, because this is a huge business you have going. Describe how that came to be. How'd you get into fly fishing and tying as a business?
So, my dad came back to Utah State, and he was here for 6 seasons, and then he got fired as the head coach at Utah State. So here we are, we're in Logan, Utah, and he's trying to figure out what to do next. And I'm a senior in high school, and honestly, he called Coach and was, his mentor, and was kind of trying to get a plan. And Coach said, "Con, you should start a fly shop." He's like, you're the best fisherman I've ever seen. He says, you really should just start a fly shop. And so that's what he did. He started a little fly shop here in Logan called Con's Trout Shop. and ran that for a year or so, and I helped him get that started. And then he had some contacts here in town, and they said, hey, you got to make these flies over in China. This was the early 90s. And so he got a connection, and he actually moved to China and started training these ladies how to tie flies. And we started our fly tying factory. And I was over here sending materials and stuff from my parents' garage, and we were communicating by the old fax machine. And yeah, everyone thought my dad lost his mind. And so we started trying to sell these flies, and just, here and there, just getting them in fly shops and sporting goods stores, and we're still going 30 something years later.
Wow.
So that's kind of how we got that transition from basketball to fishing.
That's it. So again, it goes back to Bobby Knight had the good advice.
Yeah.
To follow your passion, right? That's kind of what it was.
Yeah. That's exactly how it happened.
Wow. Okay. So you got this going, and now you're selling a lot of flies. I mean, we don't have to talk about, all the details, but you have a couple of big distributors, right? Or at least one that people would know of. Is that how you, is that where it comes from? You've got these large distributors that are handling a lot of your fly sales through Round Rocks?
Yeah. So Round Rocks, originally too, there's a few twists and turns in there. When we first started too, we had a catalog business called Round Rocks Fly Fishing, and some of your listeners maybe remember that way back for a few years. But really, the wholesale fly thing was kind of the main thing we were doing. We started selling to Sportsman's warehouse here in. They had one store here in Salt Lake. This again 30 years ago, and we went in there, and they didn't have any bead heads, and this was when bead head nymphs were just coming out.
Oh wow. And
we had tied up a ton of little beadhead nymphs. So we went in there and said, hey, look, you don't have any of these beadhead nymphs. Let's put a little display of them. We'll just give them to you and see if they sell. About a week later, they came back and said, hey, all those beadheads you put in here, man, we're out. We sold them all. So that's really how we started selling to Sportsman's Warehouse. Now, of course, they have like 130 stores nationwide, and we're the sole supplier. We supply every one of their stores. Just our family, my dad and I.
That's it.
That's us. So if you go into Sportsman's and buy a fly, they're coming from us. So that's where they come from. That's
amazing. And I go to Sportsman's quite a bit, actually. It's a kind of a local store. And so that's cool. I love that story because 130 store, and Sportsman's is huge. I mean, they have everything. I mean, not just flies and but they pretty much all camping outdoor stuff. So, and the China thing is also interesting to me because I actually, I've sourced out of China as well. I had some other outdoor products and I was doing that. And the cool thing about China, I think a lot of people don't realize is, because you do have the political stuff, but I mean, there is just amazing people in China. The people I worked with, I had a whole logistics kind of team that I built, and they're just amazing people. So do you still talk to those people quite a bit? Do you have a whole team back in China?
Yeah, we've actually transitioned away from there in the last 5 to 7 years, and now we've got a main factory in Thailand, so that we were able to transition. Yeah, it was getting a little more difficult, getting materials, getting in and out of there, and so this has been an easier thing, and so we slowly phased out of that original China factory, and moved over to Thailand. So that's where most of our flies are tied. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And do you make trips over there to Southeast Asia every year, or how's that look?
I actually met a guy that we partnered with that lives there. And so, I haven't had to do it. And nowadays with technology, we've been able to make that communication, and it works pretty smoothly. So we're pretty happy about it.
Perfect. Okay. So you have the Round Rocks. It's been going forever now. 30 years, that's a crazy amount of time, right? And really the next thing maybe that's on the timeline is Smitty's Fly Box. So talk about, talk about Smitty's Fly Box, what it is, and, what people listening might be able to get out of it.
Yeah. So a little background with Smitty's Fly Box is at Utah State University here, they have some fly fishing classes. They're 1-credit PE classes. So I started teaching those when I was in college. I went to Utah State myself, and they needed someone to teach these classes. And I was like, well, I can do that. So I started teaching those, and there's a fly fishing class, there's a beginner fly tying class, and an intermediate fly tying class. And so, you get a lot of students, and a lot of them are like, man, how do I get these materials for these patterns that we're tying? And so I'm always was getting these boxes of materials put together for these kids. And I started thinking about it. I was like, man, I ought to just do like a subscription box built around this class, an intermediate fly tying box and a beginner fly tying box. So that's what it is. It's a subscription. You can sign up, and we choose a pattern each month for each box, a beginner fly tying and an intermediate. And we put together materials and send you a box of materials to tie, about 25 flies. So it's actually a really good deal. It's a great way if you're just starting out in fly tying. And, gathering materials can be difficult, and you end up, going 10 different places, and you're trying to figure out what materials work for this pattern. So we just put it all together in one box, and it's actually been really fun. Had a really good response with it. But we also send flies, because we have a warehouse full of flies. So if people want to just get flies, they just tell us where they're fishing, and we'll put together an assortment of flies specific for them, all the way from saltwater to warm water and time of year. So we don't just send a bunch of random flies. We look at every subscription and say, oh man, Joe Smith in North Carolina, where's he fishing? And then we put an assortment together for him. So yeah, it's been a good thing. It's been a fun thing, and just trying to get the word out a little bit about it. But that's Smitty's Fly Box.
That's Smitty's Fly. So if somebody's listening now and they want it, so they could either get the fly tying box, or if they wanted flies, they could call you and say, hey, I'm in this state, I'm fishing here, and you would put together an assortment and send it out to them.
Yep, absolutely. Actually, when they sign up, it prompts them to tell us where they're fishing, what type of fish they're targeting. They'll say, oh, I'm targeting warm water or bass in this lake that I like to fish at. We'll actually do the research, because we distribute flies nationwide. So we get a pretty good feel for what people are using everywhere. And put together a fly box. And then we have a combo box where if they're interested in more than one box, they can get 2 boxes into one. So if they want to get flies and a fly tying box, you can sign up for the combo box. So yeah, and it's really, $25 free shipping. It's a great deal, really.
No kidding. Yeah, that's it. $25 free shipping, and they get basically, like you said, you get how many patterns? What do you get out of that? The $25 is like monthly, just a monthly box. Yep.
You get a monthly box. So if you got the fly box, you'd get 12 flies, 6 patterns, and then we throw in leaders or tippet. We do use Orvis tippet. And then we'll have an accessory, a sticker, and we have like a monthly newsletter that we send with it. With the fly tying boxes, you're going to get enough enough materials to tie about 25 flies, and then we'll send variations. We'll send a couple colors of dubbing. We'll send maybe a couple sizes of hooks. So you get a little variation in that 25 flies, and you'll always have excess materials. So I get guys emailing me. They're like, hey, man, I got to stop the subscription because I'm just getting piled up with thread. And so,
yeah.
So your materials can pile up pretty quick for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. And you also do videos too, right? You guys have like a YouTube channel, and talk about that. Do you have videos for all the patterns so people can kind of walk through? How do they learn to tie the fly?
Yeah, so on our YouTube channel, we'll record a tutorial for each pattern every month, and they're on our YouTube channel, which is just Smitty's Fly Box. And yeah, so works out good. And then we also in the newsletter will have photos of the step-by-step instruction as well that's included in the box.
Gotcha. Going back to the shop, what was it, the Conn's Fly Shop?
It was called Conn's Trout Shop in Logan, Utah. My dad is Con Smith, Kohn, and he had a little fly shop, just honestly a little one-room, hole-in-the-wall, Conn's Trout, your typical
sure
90s fly shop.
Yeah, I know it well, and it's interesting because I grew up around a little fly shop that's not around anymore. My dad had a shop, and I kind of grew up around, so I remember the small shop and all the stuff, right? So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I kind of have a connection. I've always loved that's part of my fly shop and just this whole thing, my journey. But but he ended up, I guess he just ended up going into what was the more profitable thing, and the shop closed down eventually. Is that kind of how it looked?
Yeah. So, running a one-man operation back then, it was tough. And we still had, my sisters were young at home, but he met a guy. How that worked was, there's a local business here that makes treadmills and stuff. And they had connections in China, and they just approached him and were like, hey, look, you could just come use our space and start producing flies over there. And he just kind of felt like, oh, that might be a good transition or something new. So he sold his fly shop, and that's how he got into doing the wholesale flies. And then he kind of did the catalog thing along with that. Once he started making flies, then it just kind of took off from there.
Right. That's it. Yeah, you guys haven't looked back. Nice. Well, and I there's a few other things I want to touch base on. Maybe just talk about some of your patterns. I want to dig into that, but I want to check back on with Bobby Knight, because we talked about that a little bit, and I'm interested in that. I know he's having some struggles. I think he's getting older, or in his old age. But what was that? I mean, what did you, when you look at Bobby Knight, your dad, the influence? I mean, it must have been being around one of the greatest basketball coaches really of all time. I mean, is there stuff you take away, your dad took away from a business life perspective that you think about from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he found the perfect fishing buddy in my dad, really. Those two. But yeah, he's had an influence, and just that level of, commitment to excellence, I guess you could say, and being around that sport and driven. I mean, it was very demanding, of course, working for him was really demanding. But, coaches, I think that's what really helped propel my dad in the business thing, was working for him, being a recruiter and all of those types of things, and just get it done, do it. And so I think that really helped my dad when he started the business. And, but it's funny, I'll circle back a little bit, how they met, really. My dad was he was just a high school basketball coach here in southern Idaho. Westside High School. It has like 100 students.
Where's that? Where's Westside in southern Idaho? Where is that?
Dayton, Idaho. It's just outside of Preston, right on the border of Utah.
Oh, okay.
Little tiny school. He was the head basketball coach, football coach. He was just like 22, but we were always fishing. But Coach Knight, he would come out west and do these coaches clinics, but he always wanted to go fishing. So he'd ask whoever who was doing the clinic, he'd say, hey, I'll come out and do this clinic, but someone's got to take me fly fishing out west. And that's how my dad hooked up with him, as this guy was like, hey, you got to take Bobby Knight fishing. And so, my dad has this little red truck, and he's like poor as a dirt, church mouse. And so he's like taking Coach Knight, and Coach Knight was trying to figure out how to fish the Madison River.
Oh, wow.
And I think my dad drew him a map, and we fished the Madison. My grandpa fished. We've been fishing the Madison 100 years.
Oh, no kidding.
And my dad drew him a little map, $3 bridge, the whole story. You go in there and you got to put $3 in the can and go to this rock and use these flies. And so he went up there and caught some fish, and he called my dad back. He said, hey, man, I had a great trip. He says, why don't you come up and meet me? And that's kind of how they started. And then they would go all over Wyoming, and my dad would drive, and he's like, oh, I don't have any money. And I got this truck that's going to break down. And they would go around all over Wyoming and Montana and Idaho and fish like all summer long. And that's kind of how they met, as fishing buddies. And then, of course, a few years later, when they won the national championship in 1981, they had Isaiah Thomas. And that summer, Coach called and said, Con, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, you're coming to Indiana to be my assistant coach.
Wow.
So we packed up the family and moved out there.
Gosh.
And that's kind of how that connection. So it really was through fishing is how that connection.
What was that like for you? What was that like for you moving, Utah to Indiana for those 6 years?
Yeah, I was just little then. I was 6 years old, but it was awesome. Really, it was amazing. So, just to be at that level. So he went from a little high school in Utah. Actually, in those years, he moved to a new high school, Bear River High School in northern Utah. But he went from Bear River High School to Indiana. You don't see that kind of jump in coaching these days.
Oh, right. But when you're Bobby Knight, yeah, you can pretty much do whatever you want to do.
Yeah. So he hired my dad from this little high school, and that's how we got back there. So
wow. And so I was thinking, so Isaiah, I knew Bobby. Yes, I mean, obviously Isaiah Thomas, one of the great point guards of all time. And the interesting thing about Isaiah Thomas is he was a pretty hard-nosed ball player too. I mean, for sure. He had that mentality, right? You didn't mess with Isaiah. I mean, the bad boys, right? Detroit Pistons, right? I'm sure.
Yeah.
Dennis Rodman, that whole team was built around Isaiah pretty much. And so, like, that's Bobby Knight, right? That was a big influence, I'm sure, for Isaiah.
I'm sure, yeah. Being with Coach and being in that program for a couple of years. And plus, he's a Chicago kid, so he's tough anyway. But combine that with his couple years with Coach Knight, yeah, he's a tough guy, tough, hard-nosed kid. For sure.
Wow, that's so cool. This is good. Okay, so we got the basketball taken care of, and which is amazing. So let's take it back. I want to talk a little on flies. What like you've got everything. I mean, so when we go back to Sportsman's and all those flies, 130 shops. I mean, what flies are you covering there? Do they cover everything? Trout, bat, panfish, like all the flies?
Yeah. So we they have a lot of stores out in the Midwest and the eastern warm water areas. So we do a lot of bass patterns. We do saltwater patterns, everything, steelhead, salmon stuff, and then obviously the main focus is most of the trout patterns. And all the flies in there are sold for the same price, so it's a good deal. But yeah, we do a little bit of everything.
Gotcha. And what are the typical prices wise? Like what if you go into Sportsman's, what are you going to pay for a pattern at Sportsman's?
$1.39, which is unbelievable, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
$1.39. That's probably for just your typical fly, which seems absolutely amazing because I mean you see a lot of flies out there for $3 and up. I mean, I even had somebody on the podcast recently. She ties custom, and she was talking about a $45 fly pattern that she was tying for one of her clients. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And so that's where we're at, and that's where we've been with them for 30 years. Is kind of that same price across the board, and that formula's worked, and we work really hard to, obviously the perception is, well, they must be cheap or whatever, but they're all tied with, good hooks from Japan. Whiting Farms has been a great partner of ours from the beginning. We use all their hackle. We source all the materials ourselves here to the warehouse. So they're all using good materials. And I think, we've been able to sell them for that cheap just because, like I said, it's just my dad and I. So there's not a lot of, we're just a family business. So we can make it work, and we're just a small family business, and can keep our costs down quite a bit to be able to sell a fly for that.
Right. No, and that's part of it, right? Yeah, keep your costs down, and I mean, obviously, having staff, that's a huge for most businesses. That's a big cost. Probably the biggest thing is paying for staff. And then, so I've noticed on your videos, there's some, like on somebody that's doing the tying. Who's doing the tying on the videos?
Me.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah, that's me. Or there's a couple of, Courtney is a friend of mine that we hired.
Yeah, Courtney.
Yeah, he's done a few of them as well. So he's a kid that he took our fly tying classes at Utah State, and he was just hanging around. I says, man, I got to hire him because he's a fish nut and a very talented fly tyer. And so, yeah, we're glad to have him on board, and he's been working for us for about 5 years. So he does a few of the videos, and he's actually teaching some of the classes nowadays at Utah State. So,
oh, right.
Yeah, so he's a good guy. Yep.
Yeah, so you're still doing that. Yeah, you still have the Utah State, which is interesting too because we, the Penn State program, we had George Daniel on a while back and talked about that. And there's not a lot of colleges, as my guess, around the country that have, fly fishing classes. But obviously Pennsylvania and Utah are a couple. I mean, are there other colleges around the country that have the similar fly tying, intro fly fishing, fly tying?
You know what? I haven't heard of many. I think Montana State might have something, but that's the only other one that I've heard. But we have 6 classes we teach, and they're really popular. So every one of our classes gets full every semester. So it's a very popular class. There's a little ranch out here in Cache Valley where we live, that allows us to bring the students out. So it's like a little private fish ranch. So, and the fishing is actually really good there. And so we take the students out there and it works out great. Everyone can fish. Everyone, we get a lot of fishing involved in the class. So it's a very popular class for sure.
Gotcha. So this is not only fly tying. So this is like basically a fly fishing 101 sort of deal.
Yeah. So we do 2 sections of fly fishing 101 basically. And then we have a beginner fly tying class, an intermediate fly tying class, and a rod building class. So we'll actually build a fly rod in one of our classes.
Oh, and build a fly rod. There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're covering. I mean, that's essentially, I'm like a fly shop, right? I mean, that's what a fly shop would be doing, but it's at the college. So you're kind of doing everything that a fly shop would do, just a little bit of a different type of way, right?
Yep. So
a quick break for a word from our sponsor. Smitty's Fly Box, delivering monthly flies, fly materials, and accessories each month with their Smitty's subscription fly box. If you need a unique fly selection for a new water you're fishing, or if you want to get started fly tying the easy way, Smitty's has you covered. They will find out where you're fishing and supply you with a custom fly assortment. And Smitty's has been producing high-quality flies and materials for over 30 years, and you may not realize it, but Smitty's is connected to Round Rocks, who is the sole supporter to Sportsman's warehouse and has tied and supplied millions of flies over the years. I was at Sportsman's this week and picked up a couple of dozen flies, some chubby, small and large dry flies, some terrestrial patterns. The quality was exceptional. That's one of my struggles, is the dry flies. So I love looking at these little guys, from small little tiny flies that I can barely see with my eyesight to the big ones. And these are the same people who are delivering and tying these flies to your door with Smitty's Fly Box. It's a great time right now to get stocked up for the season. You can head over to smittysflybox.com right now to take a look at their selection of flies and monthly boxes right now. Let Smitty's take the guesswork out of choosing fly materials and patterns right now. This is also an easy way to support this podcast and a small business who has been producing high-quality flies for many years. Check them out right now. That's Smitty's, SMITTYS, smittysflybox.com. Okay, back to the show. Let's hear about, your flies. So if we were going to be getting a selection of, like the monthly box, and somebody that's kind of brand new, maybe wants to get into fly tying, where do you start? And what's the first box? What are the fly patterns that you train? Because I remember I did a little bit of this myself. It's not easy, but you think of like, okay, you got the woolly bugger, you got certain flies. What do you guys start? What's your top 10, 12 flies that you would put into a beginner box? Yeah, so with the beginner fly tying box, we do a lot of traditional patterns. We'll do, like you said, a woolly bugger. We'll do, your pheasant tails, elk hair, caddis, a lot of the traditional patterns in our beginner fly tying box, and really just mirrors what we do in our teaching our class. We always start with a woolly bugger too. That's like the first fly. And then, but we'll sprinkle in some of our own stuff as well. Some patterns that we tie just to keep it kind of fun and fresh. And then I think last month we did a Frenchie nymph for the beginner, a Lance Egan pattern. We did that one. And then the intermediate box will branch out a little more and do a lot, like, again, some of our patterns or stuff that's really trending and kind of hot right now. I think we did a fly called a Chernobyl last month in the intermediate, which is like a small chubby Chernobyl, like a little mini chubby Chernobyl. But we stay pretty much mostly trout focused in the fly tying boxes. But that's kind of, we have it in mind. We're sitting here thinking, okay, if you're just learning how to tie flies, what patterning is this going to really, we don't want to overwhelm people with the beginner fly tying box. So we keep it pretty simple. Like elk hair. And so that's the thing, is that I always think about, my biggest struggle has always been like the dry flies. And part of that's like not putting the time in, but you've got you got Adams parachutes and stuff like that, but more the Catskill style dries. Do you guys mess with like any of that stuff? Because those seem to be, you do. Yeah. Well, we lay out the patterns for the year and we sit down and have a good meeting, me and Courtney, and we try to spread it out. We'll say, okay, we need to do a dry fly, and we'll kind of rotate. We'll do a nymph, we'll do a streamer, and just throughout the year. So we'll do Adams and parachute Adams and kind of thorax style flies. And we always use Whiting Farms hackle that we'll hand pick and size. And that's part of the instruction, learning about hackle
and sizing it for them and all of that. So
Right. That's a big part of it. Yeah, and we had a whiting. I don't have the episode in front of me, but we heard the story from the whiting farm story, and it's an interesting one. Do you talk to the owner there often at whiting?
Not too often. I talk to Phil, who kind of runs some of that relations with customers, and we went and visited. I was at their facility in the fall, and man, yeah, it's amazing what they've done. But we started buying hackles again in the early 90s. That's when Tom Whiting was really getting going.
Oh, right.
Figuring out how to get this hackle and to see what he's done with hackle and how it's come along. Back in the 80s, you couldn't get hackle really good hackle it was hard to find good hackle for dry flies and stuff.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so what he's done for fly tying and the ability to make, really small dry flies and has been pretty awesome, really. So.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, and I'm looking at it. It's episode 115, Whiting Farms with Tom Whiting. And yeah, the thing you hear when you hear Tom is, he is a super nerd. It's awesome. Like he goes, the genetics is what he is. I think he might be a geneticist, right? Or,
yeah. He definitely knows his stuff.
He knows his stuff. So that's what he did. He took it to the next level. And obviously we're all better because of it, or tying better flies, because that's the struggle with the dry flies, is that if you don't have the right hackles, you're not going to tie a great fly, right? That's the key.
Exactly. Yep.
So good. Okay. So that's, a little bit on your materials, flies. I mean, what else should we know about what you have going, whether Smitty's or the stuff you have going with Round Rocks? Anything else you want to shed light on that we're missing here? It sounds like we've touched base on most of it.
Yeah. We're just trying to transition a little bit and get our name out there, the Round Rocks flies. And we have a lot of shops reaching out to us, and so we don't just sell to Sportsman's. We have a lot of other customers and a lot of fly shops that call us. And so, Round Rocks is a name we haven't really pushed. Again, we've been around 30 years and most people don't even know who we are. And so that's kind of what it is. I want to put a face to behind the flies. Mm-hmm. And so we're doing that, and that's busy and a lot of fun. And then the Smitty's fly box again is kind of a thing we've been dabbling in that I'd like to get the word out a little bit and build more relationships along the way. So
right. And we just recently had an episode with it was pretty interesting because I heard the Renzetti Vices, right? We had Lily Renzetti on, and she told the story of that company, which has been around for 50 years.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I haven't, used Renzetti before, but obviously know about him. But there's all these great stories, and you're another one, a family business. So I feel like, and I had a family business with my family, right? It seems like that's what makes fly fishing and tying one of those special places, that there's a lot more of that than there is the corporate thing. Is that what you've seen over the years being around it?
Oh yeah. Being in the industry, it's built with, small little operations like ourselves, and it usually is born out of because we love to fish and tie flies, and so that's what's cool about it, is it's the people, really, guys telling fish stories, and people that were fishing in their local rivers, and they start peddling a dubbing or something that they created. Right. There's so many of those stories and it's funny. A lot of our vendors, it's like that. It's like some guy that's making dubbing out of his garage, and we're buying it from him. And that's what he does.
Oh, right.
There's a lot of those around for sure.
Oh, right. So there's literally just some person that out there, and he's just got this special dubbing, and that's his business. He's got this thing going.
Yeah. And you got to find it, and you got to call him and oh yeah, I'll send you some dubbing here and there.
Right.
And, this guy that's, he has a tannery, and oh man, I need to get a few hides from you. And so, okay, and send me a couple deer hides, that kind of thing. And
right.
That's what's kind of fun about it, really, is it's still like that in fly tying, the majority of it.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing you hear a lot about, and you've probably seen this too, but synthetics these days there's so many synthetics, and there's lots of new. Do you see that as a big change? Do you see a lot of new materials? Is it hard to keep up with all the new materials, or do you guys have like a standard flies you tie and you don't have to worry too much about all the new stuff?
No, we're definitely paying attention to the new stuff all the time. We have a good relationship with Hairline Dubbin, and they're really at the forefront of a lot of the newer synthetics and stuff. And so, yeah, we're always messing around with stuff like that and stuff that we find on our own. And that's what's great about fly tying is there's really no limit to what you can use. But we were joking the other day in the shop. We were like, man, how much different types of dubbing do we need? And
right.
They're all kind of the same, really. So, but everyone's got an ice dub, a flash dub, a lightning dub, but they're all kind of like the same dubbing, really. So
yeah, it's the same. It's the same. Dubbing is, what is dubbing? Just some synthetic, polypropylene or what? Right? Is that?
Yeah, just This like a synthetic blend of different types of yarns and things like that, sparkle and angel hair and stuff included.
Right. That's it. Amazing. So, and what is your home? So you mentioned a couple rivers up in Montana, Idaho. What now is your home? If you're going out there and you're going to go fish the river that probably some people know about, is there one that you really target?
Yeah. So we live in a great spot. So I've mentioned Cache Valley. We're in Logan, Utah, which we're about an hour from the Idaho border. So right here in our valley, we have about 5 rivers that come out of the mountains here. We have the Logan River, which is home to a lot of native cutthroat trout.
Now, what cutthroat are these? Because you've got Yellowstone cutthroat, you got West Slope cutthroat, or is this one of those species?
Bonneville cutthroat trout.
Oh, Bonneville! Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, you can catch a bunch of nice cutthroats right on the Logan River, and that runs right through town here in Logan. And then just to the south, the next canyon over, we have the Blacksmith Fork River, which is similar to the Logan River. We've got the Little Bear River, and we've got to the north of us, we have another river called the Cub River. So there's lots of little streams. I mean, literally 5 minutes from my house where we're going to fish. That's my home water. But just across the border, we're 3 hours from the Henry's Fork.
Oh, wow.
The Madison's 4-hour drive. The Green River in Utah is about a 4-hour drive. And so in every direction, we've got the Snake River, we've got the Provo. So there's a lot of fishing right here, but right in town, I would say the Logan River and the Blacksmith Fork River would be our home water.
That's right. And where does the Logan, do you know which way? I'm not even looking at a map. I don't know, but where does that flow? What does it flow into?
So that'll join with the Blacksmith Fork River kind of down here in the marshes, and then it'll empty up into the Bear River and head down into the Great Salt Lake.
Oh, yeah. Right. So into the Great Salt Lake, which means, and then that's the end of it.
You asked me this question, and I should know this because I've lived here, but I've never really I'm not 100% about that. I'll be honest with you, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it. But
yeah, well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out for you because I'm starting to think. I'm now looking at the map. I'm thinking, okay, where does? Yeah, because you got the Great Salt Lake, which is, so you got Salt Lake City. I'm trying to do. Oh yeah, Logan. So you're up north of Salt. What are you about? Like an hour and a half from Salt Lake?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, hour and a half, and then you got Preston. Yeah, you're right there. So we've been doing a lot up in southeast Idaho with some stuff there. So we've talked a lot about the South. In fact, I'm going to the South Fork this year with Pete Erickson and a crew. We're going to be up there fishing the Snake, which is going to be good. But yeah, right around just south of the border is you guys. I mean, you're right there.
We're right there. We can go. We float the South Fork a lot, and actually, we do it in one day. We drive up, float it, and come home that night.
So you do?
Uh-huh.
Right on. And what do you like to do when you float the South Fork? Do you have because there's a few different sections. What's the section you guys like?
We'll float the first section right below Palisades Reservoir. That's great. There's a lot of little braids, and we'll fish. This time of year, dry flies into the bank, like dry dropper type stuff, and then if you can get into the riffles and the cutthroats, get in there and start working on PMDs and stuff. It can be really great dry fly fishing. You can always nymph fish along the way anytime and pick up fish. And then, the streamer fishing there's some really big fish in there if you can get them to bite a streamer. And so that can be a lot of fun too. So we'll do a little bit of everything when we float the South Fork. But there's a canyon section that's really good too. That's a little bit longer float, but there's tons of character in there. You got cliff walls and you've got drop-offs and big pools and shallow riffles. And during the salmon fly hatch, which is kind of going on right now, the tail end of it, it's probably the tail end of it.
Yeah, right now as we're talking, just so people are aware, it's like July 19th to July 20th, right? So we're in this and it's starting because we just had Justin Hayes on from the Palisades Lodge at Palisades, and he was talking about that. Yeah, so he was describing that how it's a little bit late because of the high water this year, but it's happening. So it's on now. It happens for a couple weeks, right? So probably by the time this goes live, it'll probably be over. But at least right now, it's on, right? There's salmon flies everywhere.
Yeah, it's usually around the 4th of July is kind of the benchmark. But yeah, I think it's been a few weeks late this year, like he said. But so I've heard that, there's still a few fluttering around and fish are still swirling on them here and there. So, but yeah, we'll fish it. Yeah, there's another section down towards the highway bridge. It's a little hairier to float and to row in there, but there's some big fish down there as well. So yeah, we'll fish all the sections of it.
Yeah, good.
Well, good for you.
Yeah. No, it's going to be fun. I've been thinking about, it's one of those famous rivers. There's a bunch around there. You mentioned a few of them, the Madison and all that stuff, but for sure the Henry's Fork in the South Fork. And it's kind of the headwaters of the Snake River, one of the great rivers, right, of the West. So it's the start of an amazing, of that system. So I'm looking at Logan. I think, so when you're in Logan goes right through the town, the Logan River, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Logan River, I see it. So it goes right through Logan River, and then it flows out. Yeah, I think it just flows pretty much. That's the thing. It goes into the Salt Lake. Although I don't know. I'm not gonna try to track it down. We're gonna leave that for somebody else to figure out.
I know the fishing's not any good down there, so I don't care about it. I go up the canyon. And I head upstream, instead of downstream.
Right. yeah, that's right. Because the Salt Lake is interesting. The Great Salt Lake is interesting because I think there isn't an outlet, right? That's the thing. It goes into the lake and then it probably just goes into aquifers and groundwater. Is my guess. It's this massive, giant deal. So. Cool. All right, Steve. Well, we've got a couple of things we've highlighted. We got your home water. We've talked a little bit about that. So I guess looking ahead, as you kind of look out, now we're mid-July. It's going to be August. The next 6 months to a year. Anything you want to highlight? You guys have coming? That we haven't talked about yet here.
No, nothing. No big events or anything like that. Just we're just making flies and tying flies. So
yeah. You're doing it. What's the number? Give me a number so people, so we can have a feel for how many flies you guys are making, tying, sending out. Like
producing in a year. Yeah, we're in the millions.
Millions.
Yes. We're producing millions of flies a year.
Millions of flies. That's it.
Yep. That's all I'm going to give you.
Yeah, that's good. No, well, I asked that because I think of one of my mentors was talking about podcasting, and one of those things was like, how do you get good at podcasting or anything? And you got to do a lot of it, right? The more you do, the faster you become an expert at it. You know what I mean? So I feel like we're doing a lot of content, and that's making this whole thing better. And you're doing a lot of flies. If you're doing millions of flies, you're good, right? You're really good at that thing you do.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those things. Do you feel like you kind of get to a thing and you kind of can't get any better? Like what's that look like as far as the learning? Are you always learning and being, learning new flies, new patterns, stuff like that?
No, I think you can always learn, like you said, and really where I learned how to really tie flies well was when I started teaching the fly tying classes, because I was having to teach someone else how to tie a fly. But I think it's like anything. I don't think you can stop learning. I especially fishing, I feel like I learn something new every time I go fishing. A new technique or a new way of doing it. The Euro nymphing thing has really come on in the last, 3 or 4 years. And it took me, to really learn that. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And, I mentioned my dad too. He's a guy, he's been fishing forever. And when he started, getting that idea of Euro nymphing and stuff, he's like, oh man, that makes sense. I'm going to try that. And so that's the great thing is fly fishing always seems to it's evolving all the time. And so there's always a new idea or a new way someone's rigging something or, and so I don't think that's going to stop really.
No. And your dad tried, he's into Euro nymphing a little bit.
Oh yeah. He's got a whole setup and he'll try anything.
Nice.
That's one thing I will say about my dad. He's not that old guy that's going to be like, well, we've been doing it this way for 100 years. We're not changing. It's more of, you're out on the water and you're paying attention and you're looking at that riffle and you're like, man, how I can see fish in that seam. How can I get a fly down to them? And now we're using tungsten beads instead of lead split shot. And and that's really the fun thing about fishing is experimenting.
Yeah, it is. No, that says a lot about your dad, I think, because my dad was actually one of those people that kind of did get a little bit stuck on things, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's cool to hear your dad is, he's Euro nymphing and because it's definitely an effective way. And you guys, I'm sure, are selling some Euro nymphing flies. Well, I know the Paragon, right? Is that something you have a little selection of Euro flies?
Yep. We're starting to funnel those into a lot of the Sportsman's warehouse stores and they're selling. That's a lot of people are transitioning and trying new things. So, but we sell a lot of the traditional stuff. We still sell a lot of pheasant tails and prince nips. And so you can't let the classics go either because they're classics for a reason. They catch fish.
They work.
Yeah, they work. So,
yeah, I think the pheasant tail is a fly that's come up many, many times. I've asked, Mike Lawson, lots of people, and it always comes back to, the pheasant tail.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just like the woolly bugger, it's one of those patterns that will always be great for some reason. I guess it's the material.
Yeah. And it's funny, most new flies are just variations of those, most modern streamers are just variations or add-ons to the woolly bugger. If you look at them, articulated streamers, most of those are just two woolly buggers put together by a wire.
That's right.
Or they're like a combination of a woolly bugger and a muddler minnow. So most of your Euro nymphs, if you look at them, they're just a variation of a pheasant tail. They just have maybe a bigger bead head on them or, So a lot of the new innovations in flies are just sprung out of some of the classics, really.
Yeah. That's right. Nice. Cool, Steve. Well, let's pull. I had a quick little rapid fire round here. Some questions I like to ask just to kind of wrap things up. And we've talked about a few of these. Just want to highlight. So I mentioned the vise. I'm curious what is your vise? Do you have multiple vices or do you have one brand that you like to use when you're tying?
I have two. I grew up on the Regal vise. Just this no nonsense bronze base. I still have that vise, and I think I've tied 1 million flies on that thing, and it still has not budged. And then I have a Renzetti that I got in the last couple of years that I love, a little like Renzetti Traveler or something, and it's great. I really like it. So yeah, I'm not really a vise snob. If it holds my hook, I don't care what it is.
Well, those are two of the best.
I don't need any bells and whistles if I just need it to hold a hook, but I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're both between the Regal, because I have those. Well, I don't have the Renzetti, but I have the Regal. Between the Regal and the Renzetti, is there like a difference between the size? Like, do they hold a small fly equally or a big fly equally?
Equally, yeah. I can't see much of a difference.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
Yep.
Good. So you're floating the South Fork or anywhere out there. What's the boat you're floating in?
Hyde drift boat. We're Hyde guys. We, Lemoyne, he's been doing it there in eastern Idaho forever. And we just started getting his boats. And I've never been in a different boat myself.
Yeah. So it's been Hyde, and Hyde does great. Like, doesn't Hyde have fiberglass and aluminum, or is it just fiberglass?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you, but ours are all fiberglass.
They're fiberglass. And what's the 16? Is this like a 16-foot just normal drift boat?
Just a normal drift boat, yep. We've got two of them.
You got two of them? Okay. So you got two. Is that just your dad's got one, you got one, or why two?
That's exactly right. And because we got a big family, every time we go, we got to tag along a cousin or a brother, and they want to jump in, and I got my kids, and so yeah. We also have a couple rafts. We have a Flycraft raft, which is great, and then just kind of a big rubber raft that we use as well.
Sure. Yeah, big. Like, do you guys do any river, like long multi-day float trip sort of stuff, camping and all that?
We've done a couple of those, like on the South Fork, but we haven't done one of those for a couple of years. We're getting a little soft the older we get, we got to stay in a cabin or something, but
yeah, right. I know. I'm noticing that myself. It's funny. I hate to age ourselves here, but I feel like I could, at one point I was sleeping on the ground just as easy as anything. And now it's like, wow, my back doesn't like sleeping on the ground as much as it used to. Do you find that that's same for you?
Yeah. We want to fish and not try to survive these days. It seems like we want to fish and get off the river and get rested and fish hard again the next day.
Yeah, that's right. Perfect.
But we're getting soft for sure. But yeah, we take those rafts. There's a couple places that we can't get the drift boats that we like to float, so we can drop the rafts down in there.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, good. And also, I always love to hear a little bit on either the podcasting or music. When you're traveling up to Idaho, what are you listening to? Or when you're listening to music, is it more music or more podcasts?
Wow, that's a good question. I love your podcast. That's why we got connected. So I listen to the Wet Fly podcast and probably a lot of Kenny Chesney and Dave Matthews. All
right. Kenny Chesney, which is kind of like country, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There you go. Kenny Chesney. All right. We're going to throw, I haven't heard that in a while, so I'm going to throw some Kenny Chesney in the show notes. Is it Chesney? Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Chesney. Yeah. All right. We'll get a song to take us out of here in the show notes today. And Steve, I think we'll just leave it there for now. And we'll send everybody out to smitty'sflybox.com and they can pick your brain on anything. Does that sound good? And we'll just keep in touch on everything we have going here.
Yeah. Anyone's feel free to reach out to me anytime. My email is just steve@smitty'sflybox.com. Reach out with any questions. I'd be happy to respond.
Perfect, Steve. All right. Well, we're excited to keep in touch here, and I'll be continuing. And I'm going to head to Sportsman's too and check out a few more of those flies. I can't believe that the price seems kind of unbelievable, right? So that's one place to definitely touch base with you. I guess if people did want to buy flies, though, it's just send you an email is the best place.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right, Steve. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Dave. It's great talking to you.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country. So if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are. And I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.